Hey, God bless you. How you doing, everybody? Just wanted to check in with y'all. I know it's Friday, TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. You made it through another week. And I wanted to bring back to you the closing table. I just wanted to talk to you about your real estate tips for the week, for the month, for the year. As far as, things that can help you in your real estate journey. I don't know if you're a seasoned investor. I don't know if you're a first-time home buyer. I don't know if you're somebody that's had their home for a couple years and maybe they're thinking about upsizing or downsizing. But either way, I would like to be that person to guide you through the real estate process. If you need a few tips, if you have some questions, please drop them in the comments. I would love to be that point of resource for you. I don't even have to be a realtor, but I would like to be a resource, somebody that can bring value to you. So this week, and I'm not going to be before you too long. This week, I wanted to talk real quick about disclosures. Disclosures is something that's really important in the real estate process when we're talking about contracts and disclosures. So when you're becoming, let's say you're a first-time home buyer, you're newer to it all, completely green, you want to get your first home, but you're trying to figure out where do you start. A lot of times you're starting with your realtor or you're starting with your lender. Whether it's the chicken or whether it's the egg, they both come eventually. So I like to say start with the realtor, because me as your realtor, I'm gonna point you in the direction of somebody that I think might have the best products for you. Maybe you're somebody who needs down payment assistance. Maybe you're somebody who needs somebody that's really good with VA loans. Maybe you're going the USDA route and you're buying a home that's rural. But regardless, based on the conversation we have, I'm going to try to pair you with somebody who's going to be a good fit. And maybe the products ain't a big thing, but you need somebody that's going to gel with your personality. So all that comes into play. And then in that beginning phases, while you're getting your ducks in a row, because you're going for your pre-approval, getting those ducks in a row, getting them over your W-2s, your tax returns, your work history, rent verification, whatever that may look like. All those things, getting those things in place, you're also going through the home buying process. That's when your realtor kicks in, right? So one of the first things we'll have to execute is a buyer's agreement. And that buyer's agreement may just be for a couple of months or whatever the case may be. Sometimes you can even do a one-off, like, I just want you to represent me on this particular home. Let's sign an agreement. Let's go see that. See, back in the day, before like the industry really started changing, people would show homes without buyer's agreements. But nowadays, things have kind of changed because disclosure and who's covering what has come into place. So nowadays, I like to still tell people I advocate for my clients, even though I might have a buyer's agreement and there might be, there definitely is compensation in that buyer's agreement. But real estate is a field where everything's negotiable, right? So out of 100 homes and 100 deals that I've done, 99% of the time, the seller ends up paying for the buyer's commission. There are some cases where, the buyer will be compensated by the buyer they're representing. But I would say 90 to 95% of the time, that compensation is coming from the seller, and it's all based on how we negotiate. There are instances where the seller might not be covering it, but there are also a lot of sellers who are open to paying for the person to have a buyer's agent, paying for you to be represented throughout the transaction, whether that's resale or new construction. So understanding those disclosures, understanding that agreement, your buyer's agreement, how long is it for? What is the compensation for? Is it for 1%? Is it for 2%? Is it for 3%? All those can equate to a different price because it's based on a purchase price. So if you have a $300,000 home and your realtor's compensation is 3%, then he's roughly making about $9,000. See, that's math that you probably never thought about. But if the seller's covering that, then you're like, okay, no big deal. I don't have to worry about that. But knowing who's covering what is part of that disclosure process. So that's something that's truly important, right? So one thing I would like to say when it comes to disclosures, that's not the only disclosure that's important. You have your home inspection. That's another disclosure that's very important. When you're going those type of contingencies. So there's contingencies in the contract. You got disclosures and you got contingencies. You want to have a home inspection contingency. You don't want to just waive that. We're not back in 2020, 2021 where people were basically selling their kidneys and selling their kids to buy a home. You know, you want to actually see what's going on with the home. You have an appraisal contingency. You're not on the hook to buy a home for more than that house is actually worth. So if you said, I'll buy this home for $400,000, but the appraiser comes back and says this home is worth $350,000, you're not on the hook for that $50,000. There has to be a renegotiation process, or you can just flat out walk away from that home. Another contingency that's important, if you're buying a home that's in an HOA community, you get a certain amount of time to actually review those HOA guidelines and say yes or no to this HOA. You might see something in the bylines and the bylaws, and you say, no, I'm not with that. No, they're not letting me have the privacy fence that I want. And, you know, or you look at their books. I've seen HOAs where they've handled the books so bad that, you know, the HOA fee that started off maybe just being $100 is now $700 a month. And trust me, there's places that turn out like this. And unfortunately for the sellers, a lot of them get trapped because buyers don't want to step into something where the HOA fee is that much of their payment. So those are things to take and consider when you think about contingencies, when you think about disclosures. Another disclosure that's important, a lot of companies have affiliated business arrangement disclosures. That means, right, if company A, realty company A, also owns a title company, and they said, come use our title company, they have to tell you that they have this type of relationship with, and they have ownership in that company. So a lot of times as realtors, sometimes we have favorites and, you know, different companies, but sometimes companies actually own pieces of other companies. For example, Fathom owns a title company called Veris Title. I think Veris Title is great. You know, for the most part, you know, it's flexible, it's competitive as far as pricing. But I have to tell you and disclose that there's that type of affiliated business arrangement when it comes to that title company. Another example is like they own a insurance brokerage. So if I recommend, I think you should go with such and such insurance, and there's some type of relationship, there has to be some type of disclosure to let you know that, hey, these two companies are in some way connected. So those are things that are important to know when you're in the process, because you know, while you're going through this process and you're seeing this 9-page contract of stuff that you've never seen before, you know, it can become overwhelming. But it's important to understand those contingencies, understand those agreements. Even when you're making an offer, oftentimes it expires after a certain amount of time. If I make this offer, you know, on Friday, when do I want it to expire by? If I'm trying to hear an answer immediately, sometimes it's less than 24 hours. Sometimes it could be less than 12 hours. I need an answer right away. So those are important things to know about the real estate process and when you're dealing with contracts. Whether you're a seller, whether you're a buyer. If you're a seller, how long is your listing agreement for? What is your agreed starting price? Those are things you want to know. Because in my opinion, when I'm listing a home, I don't really tend to list it for much longer than 60 days. Because if something's not working, I want to be able to go back to the drawing board. I want to be having that open communication with you, seller, and letting you know, hey, this is what's going on this week. You know, things were slow. This was the feedback from the showings, yada, yada, yada. By in 60 days, I'm almost ready to start fresh if we haven't gotten the home sold, because based on the feedback, we know we need to do X, Y, Z to come back even stronger next time. So all those are things to know when you're in the real estate process, and sometimes those are correlated directly to the contracts, the disclosures you're dealing with. You know, it's not just people shoving things in your face. That's kind of how it feels. Real estate is a wild profession because it's one of the few where somebody will give you a million things to sign and sometimes not always explain them. But a good realtor, a good closing attorney, a good anything will explain anything that you're signing. Don't just sign willy-nilly. Have somebody break down what you're actually looking at. One of the most important contingencies you have in your offer that you're making to a potential seller is your financing contingency. What happens if you get in the middle of this process and all of a sudden, you know, your loan is not approved? or you know, you lose your job, you're not on the hook to buy a home if the financing contingency, which you were doing in good faith, all of a sudden becomes unsatisfactory. If you get a loan denial, you're not on the hook for that home because there's a contingency that's protecting you in that process. But if you don't have knowledge of that, you'll be kind of uneasy about the process. You won't exactly know. And all that stuff is in there, like even the closing date, the date we're aiming for, and you know, so on and so on. There's so many layers to that contract, but a good realtor understands the contract front and back and will be able to guide you through, like, hold on, there's certain disclosures in here. You know, even as somebody that's buying, let's say you also have a home to sell, there's a paragraph in there that talks about disclosing whether you have a home to sell. I can't just make an offer knowing I got a home to sell, and the only way I can buy this home is if that home sells. I have to disclose that to the people that I'm submitting this offer to, because if that offer falls apart or if I never get under contract, then I'm never going to be able to buy this home. So there's disclosures for that. There's a disclosure just about for anything in real estate. And one of the most important things when it comes to we were just talking about the contingency as far as, you know, a home inspection. Virginia is a buyer beware state. You know, if there's something going on with your home, that's why it's so key to do a home inspection, because it's not on the seller to let you know, hey, XYZ is going on with the home. While they cannot defraud you, they cannot just paint over mold or paint over or just basically cover up something that's blatant. It's not their job to let you know everything. So that's why it's so important, and that's why we often scream from the rooftops, hey, get a home inspection, because you want to be confident in the home that you're buying. And all this kind of goes back to the paperwork process, knowing what you're signing, knowing your contingencies, knowing your disclosures, and being fully informed in the process. So thank you for tuning in for another week. I'll check back in with you guys next week. If you have any questions, like, comment, share, drop your comments in the comment section. I would love to answer your real estate related questions.